Welcome back to Snow The Goalie, the only Flyers podcast. I'm Russ Joy at Joy on Broad, joined as always by Anthony SanFilippo, the #1 Flyers beat writer, who you can find on Twitter at @SanFilly. Make sure you go follow him. Anthony, the last show we did was a little bit unconventional. You actually outed one of the former beat writers or former Flyers insiders as being a scoundrel and a creator of #fake news. How are you feeling?
I'm doing all right, Russ. I'm doing good. I got a lot of positive response to our last podcast. As a matter of fact, somebody in the industry who I was at an event with together, actually, when they saw me, they started doing like an Obi-Wan Kenobi with the lightsaber kind of thing. I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "This is what you did to the Philadelphia hockey media." It was pretty funny, actually.
That's awesome.
And the thing of it is that it was just one guy, and it was just at the end of his career. I mean, before that, he was not like that. And there are some good writers. I didn't take it to take everyone to task. I actually gave credit, I think, to one guy, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, right? I don't remember who it was, but you did. You gave some credit where credit was due.
So.
Was it Dave Isaac? I think it was
Dave Isaac.
Yeah, it was Dave Isaac. Yeah, you gave him kudos on building rapport with players. So it wasn't all negative.
No, it wasn't all negative. So and I'll tell you,
SanFilippo is Italian for fair and balanced.
Fair and balanced.
Not a lot of people know that.
And I'll just give you another one. I mean, a lot of people in this town still remember Frank Saravalli. If you are a big-time hockey head, you know he works for TSN now. How the heck do you think the guy got the job at TSN? I mean, right? I mean, the guy had to be doing his job pretty well.
Wow, look at you.
So,
complimentary.
It's the truth. I mean, he had to be. He had to be doing a job well. I mean, you don't just suddenly become an American who gets a job in Canada for covering hockey, right? I mean, there's only been like 2 or 3 guys who've ever done that, right? And he's one of them. And it had to be because he was well connected with players and agents and was respected in that manner. So there have been some good guys here, just not enough. That's the problem.
It's crazy to hear you be positive, because I spent a good chunk of my morning listening to Crossed Up, the Phillies podcast, that if people who are listening to this show are fans of the Phillies and aren't subscribed to, they should go check that out as part of the Crossing Broad Podcast Network. I was listening to you and our Phillies writer, Bob, just bantering back and forth about the Phillies, and I wasn't sure if you were going to be in a good mood tonight or not, but I think it has something to do with the fact that it's not after midnight. I think I caught you at a good hour. That's exciting.
You catch me when I'm awake, and then I'm usually much more chipper. If I'm recording it, either 6 o'clock in the morning, when we recorded at 6:30 in the morning on a Sunday.
I really
the last time we did it. So that's how you got me in like real ornery. And then if I'm doing it after midnight when I've been up all day, I mean, I'm kind of miserable. So, but you catch me now. We're recording at a reasonable time. It's just after dinner. There's still daylight outside. And, this is a good time to catch me, and you probably get me in a much better mood.
Yeah, not a good time of the hockey year, however. Not a lot going on. We're still over a month away from camp, and we are about a month removed from the Flyers making their biggest acquisition of the summer in signing back fan favorite. I would consider him a fan favorite, a guy that I certainly liked in James Van Riemsdyk. But what if we told the listeners of this show that it almost didn't happen?
What?
Anthony, an industry source has told me that there had been another plan in place.
So let me put it to you this way. We'll break down, because there's a lot I actually want to say on this. So JVR was signed, and the Flyers brought him in, and the contract was for 5 years, $7 million a year, so 5-year, $35 million contract. And if you remember, when we went and did the Snow the Goalie with Flyers GM Ron Hextall just before the draft and the trade and the start of free agency, he expressed to us, and I didn't think he was lying at the time, that the Flyers were not looking to sign anybody to a long-term deal. They were really kind of looking for stuff still like in a more of a short-term thing, because they get, we have guys coming, and we don't want to be, stuck with longer-term contracts. I mean, Hextall spent the first 4 years of his tenure as the general manager here getting rid of bad contracts as best as he could. So, I mean, you end up having a situation where he tells us this, and then 2 weeks later goes out and signs Van Riemsdyk for 5 years, $35 million, and you think, well, gee, Ron Hextall just lied to Anthony and Russ. Well, I don't necessarily think that's the case. As a matter of fact, I know it's not the case because we talked about sourcing material and how it's supposed to be done on our last episode, and it was tied into the whole Joe Giglio report for the Phillies trading for Manny Machado, which was kind of weird. We were talking about baseball on the hockey show, but at the same time, it translated. It just translates to the kind of reports that get put out there and people using sources, and you see it all the time in a lot of sports, and hockey is no different. And you really have to wonder who people's sources actually are when they are when they are reporting these trade rumors or potential free agent signings or whatever the case might be. So you always have to take it with a grain of salt. So anyway, we talked about that on the last show, and immediately, we put that thing out. We recorded it at 6:30 in the morning on Sunday. You posted it by like 10? I mean, it was out a couple hours.
Yep.
I literally it was out a couple hours, and I called you later that afternoon that somebody within the Flyers had listened to it and called me immediately to talk about the podcast and about what I had said on the podcast. And as soon as that happened, in the process of the conversation that we had about the podcast and what I said, we started talking a little bit about the team, and how it shaped up this summer, and getting ready for the off season. We talked a little bit about some of the prospects, and we'll get into that in a minute too. But I gleaned one really huge nugget of information, that JVR wasn't quite the number one target at free agency. The Flyers, Flyers' number one target, and it would make a lot more sense when you think back to what Hextall said to us, was a third-line center. Well, not necessarily a third line, but a center for sure.
I was going to say, the Flyers sure love their centers, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, Russ. I mean, so the Flyers needed a center, and we kind of, we had been talking about this, like who's going to be the center on the third line. And so the Flyers had a guy in mind that they wanted to sign, and not for a long term, like Hextall had said to us. They weren't going to look for somebody long term. So they made an offer to a player. And said player turned down the Flyers' offer to take a different deal with a different team. That player is Paul Stastny.
Whoa!
Who signed with the Vegas Golden Knights for 3 years and $19.5 million. Now, I don't want to give away all the specifics because then it might kind of, direct, people could figure out who might have told me this information, and I promised I wouldn't say anything that would, identify who the person is. But the Flyers' offer was 2 years, and the average annual value was higher over 2 years. So in other words, if Stastny would have taken the Flyers' offer, he would have gotten one less year, but would have been making more money for 2 years. But instead chose a lengthier contract that pays him more money, even though it's less per year, but it pays him out over 3 years. That's what he chose. The Flyers were stunned. They thought that there was no way he would turn down the deal. But he did.
I'm trying to wrap my head around it. I mean, he's 32.
32 years old.
He'll be 33 mid-season. Turns 33 at the very end of the year.
Yep.
So a 2-year deal at a higher annual value would seem to make a little bit more sense, right? Because you'd be better poised to, I would think, get yourself set up in a position where you're likely going to have decent stats, and you'll be able to go for that final contract. If you're locking yourself into 3 years, you never know what you're going to look like as a 35-year-old. So yeah, I don't know if that's good business by Stastny, but okay.
Well, I mean, so the way it works with Vegas, Vegas is giving him, so his average annual value is 6.5, right? So he was getting 7.5 this year, 6.5 in 1920, and 5.5 in 2021. So it totals 19.5, and it averages 6.5. I can tell you for sure that the Flyers' offer would have paid him more money through the end of the 1920 season. Okay, that much I can tell you. but the third season becomes, that's where he's getting extra money and an extra year. So I guess, if you're Stastny, you're looking at it and saying, all right, so I'm actually losing I'm losing a little bit of money over the first 2 years, but I'm guaranteeing myself a third year, and I'm guaranteeing myself extra money. Now, I'm not going to tell you exactly how much money extra he's getting, but he's getting some. It's not a lot more, but he's getting more money for sure in that third year. So, if you're Stastny, you're looking at it and saying, I'm guaranteeing myself more money and a third year of playing. That's probably why he took it, as opposed to signing the shorter term deal with the Flyers. He had a decent year last year, nothing spectacular. He put up 53 points between the Blues and the Winnipeg Jets after he was traded, 16 goals and 37 assists. And then in the playoffs, he had 15 points in 17 games for Winnipeg. He was really good for the Jets in the postseason, and he would have fit perfectly as a third line center on the Flyers team. So it doesn't surprise me that would have been their target. So when Stastny turns them down, now they don't have another center that they really like, right? So what do? They now say, okay, well, now we have to figure out another path. And so they go to Van Riemsdyk. And it doesn't surprise me. It's somebody they're familiar with. It's somebody who's going to, who's very consistent. He's going to put up a lot of goals. If you go back and look at, I'm not a huge fan of his 5-on-5 game, but if you do look at Van Riemsdyk's statistics since he left the Flyers and went to Toronto, he is really consistent as far as being a goal scorer. He had the first year he only had 18, but it was a shortened season for him. Because it was the lockout year. But then every year after that, 30, 27, injury year 14, but then 29, 36. So he's averaging 30 goals a year. That's what he's going to give you, okay? And so that's what I think the Flyers looked at and said, okay, well, at least we can get that. And we'll figure out how everybody fits in. Now you have stories being written in by reporters who are saying, oh, well, Ron Hextall's touting Jordan Wheel as a possible third-line center. And, and it's like, yeah, but that's not what they wanted. Yeah, that's a nice little, sugarcoating of the situation, but they sure don't have a third-line center right now, and they realize it. And they couldn't go out and sign two guys because they didn't want to put themselves in the financial straits that they were in previously. So basically, I think what the Flyers are going to try and do is hope that either Wheel or Lawton can be, average enough or, league average enough to get them to the trade deadline. And then at that point, assuming everyone's healthy and there's no other dire need for because of injuries, if the Flyers are in a position where they can, they're going to be making a playoff push and make a run at something, maybe they make a trade for a guy at that point. But they really wanted Stastny ahead of Van Riemsdyk. That I can tell you with 100% certainty, based off of a real source within the organization. So go ahead, Russ, respond to that. And you're not getting this anywhere else, by the way. This is being broken on.
This is an exclusive.
This is exclusive to Snow The Goalie, yes.
And you've been sitting on it for the last
almost
9 days. Yeah, almost 10 days.
Yeah,
and nobody's gotten it, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
And instead of writing it on the site, of course, you broke it on Snow the Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, which is good.
Well, it was funny. I told Kyle about this when it happened, right? And he's like, "You got to write this up," and I'm like, "Yeah, I think I would rather promote the podcast with it, right? So let's put it on the podcast. That's where we're going to break it, and then when Russ puts out the show notes and stuff, then you can mention in there that we have." Exclusive news about the Flyers, and then people will, now they're going to subscribe, and this, so it's good marketing for the podcast.
Yeah,
as well. So that's why I sat on it. We
really do enjoy having the inside access to people within the Flyers organization. So, by all means, continue to come out of the woodwork and continue to pass on the information. I'll let you pass it on to Anthony. That's fine. He seems like a delightful fella, and I'm a blabbermouth, so it probably wouldn't work out too well on my part. But I am trustworthy, if that counts for anything.
You knew about this 9 days ago too, and you didn't say anything. So
I didn't. I didn't even tell
you.
I
tested you.
my Flyers fan friends, I did not say a nary a word to them about this. So that is interesting. Now, let me kind of play. It's not even counterpoint really, but
Go ahead.
If the Flyers end up in a situation where they hit the skids early in the season, and I'm not looking for like a 10-game losing streak kind of thing, but like let's say they get out to a start where they're, I don't know, like 6-15 or something like that, and in the 15, like break that up over overtime losses and regulation losses. They're all losses. I don't care. So like let's say they start out 6-8-7. That'll be fine. See, that's good math. You say that on the fly. Not only am I trustworthy, but I have good mental math skills. # blessed. Anyway,
and then you know how they would spin it.
What's that?
They got points in 13 of 21 games.
That's how my friend David would try to spin it. David, you lovely fella, you. I bet you're missing North Dakota. Anyway, so let's imagine they're 6-8-7 to start the season. That's not going to set off too many alarm bells within the organization, I would think. But let's say that after a few more games, they hit the skids, and now they're 6-11 and 8 or something. At that point, if they've been getting minimal production out of center, is there a scenario that you can see that in a way to let's assume they also didn't fix the logjam that we've been talking about for a while, which there's kind of that elephant in the room that Wayne Simmons is still here, has not been traded, and we can't really figure out where exactly he fits on this team. Is it inconceivable, and I would think no, but is it inconceivable that Dave Haxtell could decide to split up the top line, reinstitute Claude Giroux as a center, and then you would have 3 legitimate centers between he, Sean Couturier, and Nolan Patrick? If that's the case, which we'll follow up to this after, but if that's the case, I would assume that Giroux is your top line center. Then I think it becomes a very interesting scenario if Nolan Patrick has had a good start to the year. Is there a scenario where Sean Couturier could fall from the top line center down to the third line where, I think he is a better player for that role than I think Nolan Patrick would be? And ultimately for their development, I think I'd rather see Nolan Patrick played with more skilled players on a second line. Do you see this scenario? And who is more likely in said scenario to drop down to the third line center?
I don't think it needs to be that bad of a skid, to be honest with you. I think it could happen sooner than that. And that's not a knock on Couturier. It's just because they don't really have another option. However, I will say this: if you do that, and if you do move Giroux back to center, you got to put Van Riemsdyk on his line because you need somebody for him to feed the puck to. Konechny's a nice player, and he's going to score goals as well, but he's not a guy who's going to set himself up to score goals. You need a body, right, for Giroux to feed it to.
Yep.
So if you do that, and then you keep Voracek and Patrick together, now you're bereft a left wing on the second line because Wayne Simmons is going to play, on the third line, unless you say Simmons is going to be your second line right wing and you force Voracek as a left-hand shot to finally play the left side, even though he plays on the off wing. Then you have 2 lines, but then you got Couturier playing on a third line with who? Jordan Wheel and Michael Raffel. Like who? You know what I'm saying? Like, so this is why the Flyers have kind of left themselves in a situation where they can't put Giroux back at, like really can't, start the season with Giroux back at center. They have to hope that it works. I think ultimately that's an option, but I don't think it's a good option. Let's put it that way. I think ultimately they got to hope that you stick with Giroux, Couturier, Konechny, Van Riemsdyk, Patrick, and Voracek, and you hope that Jordan Wheel or Scott Lawton kind of like takes the ball and runs with it a little bit to be a third line center with Wayne Simmons, and kind of makes that third line useful. That's what you got to hope for.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I'm still a little bit taken back. I'm gonna be honest. Like as we're kind of going through this, like Lawton to me, I'm a big, I don't know. I'm a believer in Lawton. I think I will be until he's no longer on this team. But to me, like I don't know. This whole concept of, I was hoping or thinking that any kind of a center shuffle would have to follow a big skid. The fact that you seem to think, I don't know if this is from that source or not, but the fact that you seem to think that it wouldn't take much of a skid at all to blow up that top line is, I don't know if it's alarming, But to me, like, I think Giroux on the wing prolongs his career and makes him an exponentially more productive player. So it is scary, and the way that all of this could have been precipitated by the fact that they missed out on Stasny by no fault of their own, like that kind of set into place this row of dominoes that it seems to be kind of falling in around them.
Yeah, and the only reason I say that it would happen is because I think even though Hackstall has been really, really safe to this point, despite the fact that fans were calling for him to be fired, and I called for him to be fired, and other people have kind of jumped on that bandwagon a little bit over the past year and so. If he gets off to a really bad start in his fourth year as a coach, this is the NHL, man. I don't care what your relationship is like with the general manager. Like, it's a league where you have to perform. And making a move for James Van Riemsdyk tells you that the Flyers think that they are ready to, compete at a better level than just be lingering around toward the bottom of the playoff race and clinching a spot on the final day. Like, I think that they feel like they're good enough. They're going to be a good enough team to, get into the playoffs sooner than the last game of the season. So if you get off to that bad start, I think that Hackstall has no choice if he wants to keep his job than to tinker and try and find something that will work. And so that's why I think it's a possibility. I don't think it's something he's going to do right off the bat. I wouldn't be surprised if it's something you see in training camp either, just to kind of see how things look a little bit. But, a third line of Oscar Lindblom on the left, Jordan Wheel in the middle, and Wayne Simmons on the right really does not excite it, and it shouldn't. So yeah, it's. I
might be a little bit higher on that than you, but
yeah,
if Lindblom is able to settle in, I don't think it's that bad. I think anytime that Wayne Simmons could represent your team on the third line, I think that shows that you at least have some decent depth on the wing.
Yeah.
But it kind of falls back on their inability to sign their number one target. I don't know. And I think the closer that we get to the season and the less that we hear about a potential Wayne Simmons deal, the more that I think we're, in a situation where we have to accept the fact that he's probably going to be here. And when I say accept the fact, like, I don't want that to come off as if I'm looking at that negatively. I like Wayne Simmons a lot. I'd prefer him to be on this team. But I just don't know if the role that he's going to be playing as a third line wing is really doing him justice. And I think he would be poised for a much bigger season. I expect that coming off the injuries that he had, he's going to have a bounce back year, and that's going to kind of propel, I think, what's going to be the next issue, and that's he's going to be up for a contract, and the market that's been kind of set in a way in recent signings makes me think that he's going to be cost prohibitive, especially because the Flyers signed Van Riemsdyk to a $35 million deal. I just don't see a scenario where he stays. So then we kind of get into this like potential upending of the team mid-season where, you've talked in the past about how the Flyers, the locker room, views Wayne Simmons as this great leader. If you're going to upend your team mid-season, to maybe make that trade for a center or to make some kind of a big splash at the deadline, knowing that Wayne Simmons isn't somebody that you're going to be able to re-sign at the end of the year, but you think that, he has some kind of trade value as part of a bigger package, I worry about the kind of negative ramifications that could have for the locker room, but I wouldn't be totally surprised to see them deal him at the deadline.
Well, again, it really kind of depends on the situation where the team is. But, the one thing you got to look at is Van Riemsdyk and Simmons are the same age, right? I mean, Simmons might look like he has more miles on him, but they're the same age. And I think Wayne Simmons, being, with the exception of this past season, being that same consistent 30-goal scorer that we're used to, if he comes out and starts to have the kind of season that he's used to having, he's healthy and he's putting up the goals and you're seeing him like on that pace, isn't he going to want a 5-year, $35 million contract himself?
Yep.
I mean, I think so. James Van Riemsdyk, at the same age, with similar production, is making more than $3 million a year more than Wayne Simmons. I don't know if yeah, like that's what I'm saying. So like I think that the Flyers have put themselves in a little bit of a bind with this Van Riemsdyk contract in a lot of ways, and it's funny because it was not their number one target. That if they would have just gotten if if Stastny would have just taken their offer, Van Riemsdyk doesn't sign here, and excuse me, the Flyers still have a pretty solid, top 9 forwards, but it's better balanced and less of a concern financially. And I think that this was the first time where I feel like Hextall and new vice president and assistant general manager Barry Hanrahan, who handles the salary cap, the first time they kind of went off their own page. They kind of went off script. And I don't know if it was a knee-jerk reaction or if it was this was plan B all along. I don't know. But I do know that Stastny was their number one target, and it fell through.
What's really interesting, I guess, as we kind of project forward, the fact that Tom Wilson got just over $5 million a season from the Capitals, he was an RFA, but he's 24. He's averaged, 7 goals per season, I think. He certainly did not do much to help the Flyers in their pursuit of, maybe trying to sign Wayne to a reasonable deal. But you're right. If Wayne even remotely shows himself to be the kind of player that we've grown accustomed to seeing him be, it certainly doesn't put the team in a good position financially. And, again, the Stastny thing not working out, I know that the annual value might have been higher and it was a short-term deal, but you can construct a contract to have lower value in the first couple of years and then have it balloon in the third or fourth year. I don't know. I think the info that you just provided to the Flyers fans is going to have some pretty seismic fallout, I would guess, on
we'll
Twitter.
See.
So
I got more, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, there's more. This is great.
But wait, there's more.
You get inside sources, and you get inside sources. Everybody gets inside sources.
No, this is more for down the road stuff.
This is great. Look at this. You're happy. You're not bitter or angry. You're in a good mood. We started the podcast well. We even had a tech difficulty that we edited out that nobody's going to have to know about. Well, I just told them about it. But you're even happy after that.
Yeah.
And you have more news?
I have
more.
Oh. So this is.
Oh, and we have a big announcement at the end of the podcast that I didn't preview. I'm so bad at this. I'm so bad at this. Okay, continue.
That's right. So I have some, prospect news. Let's start with the guys they drafted last year. Morgan Frost,
please.
All right, obviously had the big year in junior, and everybody's loving the fact that Morgan Frost had that big year. The Flyers even admit that they didn't expect him to put together the kind of season that he had with the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds, where he scored 112 points in 67 games and then 29 points in 24 playoff games. I mean, he had a heck of a year for the Sioux. So it came out of nowhere because the year before with the Sioux, he only put up 62 points in 67 games, and they thought he was a little bit better than that, but they didn't think he was going to suddenly jump up 50 points, okay, and in a season, and that's what he did. So everybody, of course, with a lot of Flyers fans got excited about that. He signed his entry-level contract, although he is slide eligible, so that contract can kick back in a year if he plays another year of junior, which is going to happen. But that's not the news. The news is this. The Flyers are more excited about where Isaac Ratcliffe is right now than they are Morgan Frost. As a matter of fact, they think Ratcliffe is ahead of Morgan Frost and will reach the NHL sooner than Morgan Frost. And Ratcliffe was drafted after Morgan Frost in that draft. Ratcliffe had a nice season for Guelph last year, 68, and got another guy who averaged more than a point a game, 68 points in 67 games, and he had 9 points in just 6 playoff games before they were eliminated. And he got a chance to get his feet wet with the Phantoms, played 2 games for them, scored a goal. The Flyers think that he is closer to NHL ready than Morgan Frost is. So,
he's also 6'6". He's a 6'6", 19-year-old. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's
incredible size. We need that.
Yeah,
give me size.
He's got to put a little bit more weight on. He's still not quite 200 pounds for his height.
Google says he's 201 pounds. Anthony, find a different slant. Thank you.
All right. Well, I have him at 6'5", 194.
Well, he's obviously grown according to Google. He's now 6'6", 201, and next week he'll be 6'6" and a quarter and 204 because he will have gone to Shake Shack for a double shack burger.
Exactly.
They're fantastic.
But anyway, and they play two different positions. All right, Frost is a center, Ratcliffe's a winger. But the Flyers might need a winger, later this year, and don't be surprised if Ratcliffe gets that opportunity. Just kind of throwing that out there. So that's another thing that I was told in this same conversation. We talked about this year's draft, and of course, you know that I put out on the podcast weeks before the draft that their target was Joel Farabee, and that's exactly who they drafted with their first-round pick. However, their second first-round pick kind of surprised us a little bit, right, Russ?
Yeah, sure
right?
did.
I mean, nobody expected them to draft O'Brien, and they did.
Although Regis really liked him.
Yeah, that's right.
Regis McGuire. He was really big on him on the NHL Network.
I was told in this same conversation that not that they're not excited about Farabee, they certainly are, but they're more excited about drafting O'Brien. They think O'Brien is going to be a really, really good player. Like that's what I was told in this conversation. Like he is considered internally one of the top prospects, if not their top coming prospect. Although they know it's going to take a little bit of time. He's just going into NCAA. He's going to play for Providence, but he's going to be coached up there by a coach at Providence who is really gets guys ready for the NHL, and they're really excited about him. So that's another thing. So in two consecutive drafts, we've got the Flyers currently more excited with their second guy that they drafted as opposed to the first one.
That's strange.
And I have one final thing. I have one final bit of news that is kind of on the negative side.
All right, hold on. Before we get to that,
okay,
because I want to live in the moment of positivity before you pull the rug out from under us.
Okay.
Is that a fundamental flaw with the Flyers drafting if they're more excited about their second pick? Or does it speak to the fact that they had targeted guys who they thought would have gone earlier who just happened to fall to them? Like, are they excited about O'Brien and Ratcliffe insofar as they thought those guys would have been off the board, and they think more highly of them because of where they fell to? It's a higher value at where they were selected.
I don't think it's a negative. I think it shows. I mean, the one thing I will say this about the Flyers drafting and the group that they've had in place there for a while now. I think that they have a really good group of scouts, and they're really good at identifying players who are going to become NHLers or have a chance to become NHL players. And I think that this is indicative of. Usually the first round, everybody knows who the first round guys are, right? I mean, there's a kind of a consensus. But then usually when you get to like the back end of the first round and then definitely into the second and third rounds, then it becomes more all over the place because every player has, a flaw or something that's preventing them from being a first round pick. And then it's really kind of you identifying what you think will play better and what you can work on and what you can get, what your people can make happen for this player to get them to the the level that you think they can get to. And so the Flyers have been really good at identifying these players. And so, O'Brien was, a lot of people said was a reach, and yet, here they are thinking that he's going to be a guy that's going to be a really good player for them for a long time. Ratcliffe was, couldn't skate. That was why he dropped. I mean, usually you get a forward with that size, and you say, oh, man, that's got to be a first-round forward, right? Well, no. They were worried about his skating, but he's really worked on his skating. It's vastly improved. It's never going to be superior because he's, a lumbering player, but at the same time...
He's better than Jori Lehtera. Good. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, let's go back. I mean, Scott Hartnell was really good in this league for a long time, and he could never skate. He could never stay on his skates.
He fell down a lot.
Remember the whole Hartnell down thing, right?
I loved it. I mean, it was the hair.
It was awesome.
Yeah, you can't cut your hair. That's like, was it Samson? Samson loses his hair, loses all his strength. Hartnell cuts his hair. It's not funny anymore. It's not cute. It's like going from a baby and then you're like 10 years old and you're still falling over. Like, now we're worried about you medically. It's not as cute.
But anyway, so Ratcliffe is that kind of guy, They feel like his skating has finally come along to the point where, you know what, he's closer to NHL ready than Morgan Frost is, and it's only because it's not that that's not a negative about Morgan Frost. It's just that Frost is going to need time to grow into his body. He's just not physically ready for it, and you're gonna see that over the course of the next season or two as he's got to build that up and get himself ready to play in the NHL. Ratcliffe, being that big-bodied guy already, has that physical advantage of having his process expedited a little bit over Frost, and that's why they're excited about him. So I don't think it's a negative at all. I think it's very much saying, hey, you know, we've done our homework really well, and we think we could identify these players and get them to the NHL quicker, even if we're taking them later on in the draft.
Get to your negative. Now I'm scared. See, I don't like negative. Don't give me.
It's a prospect. It's prospecting.
How negative?
Well, they're very disappointed with a former first-round pick. How about that?
Oh, that's
very disappointed. I mean,
very. Ooh.
Yes. So
now is this is like on ice? This is off ice? Like, is this personal or is this professional? Is it both?
It's from what I mean, it could be. If there's anything off ice, it was not portrayed to me in this conversation. Okay. Herman Rupsov. They are very upset with the fact that he has just been willing. So in the queue, he's actually played for two different teams now in the queue. He started with Chicoutimi and then was traded to Katie Bathurst. And once he got to Bathurst, they kind of put him into more of a checking line role. And he kind of accepted it and just kind of played it, you know, ho-hum. He was, you know, when you're a first-round pick in the NHL, you need to be better than a point-per-game player in junior hockey. And he scored 12 goals in 38 games for Bathurst. He had, before he got traded, only 3 goals in 11 games for Chicoutimi. So 15 goals in 49 games. And then in the playoffs, he had 5 goals in 19 games. So he really wasn't the dominant player that they need him to be, and it's because he accepted kind of like just, all right, you need me to just be a third-line guy, that's just going to be what I'm going to be. And so they're not happy with that mental approach to the game. Like, okay, all right, yeah. He's not challenging himself, and that's why they're disappointed in him. And they're concerned because this is actually, you know, they're seeing this a couple times now. I mean, a couple years ago when he first when he was playing in Russia, okay, he was playing in the KHL as a 18-year-old or 17-year-old, he couldn't score, and okay, big deal. But when he came over to the Q, he put up 22 points in 16 games, but it was like, okay, he needs to be a little bit better than that. Let's see him at the beginning of the 17-18 season when he's a top player, and then he just didn't do it. He never kind of asserted himself in that way, and that's bothered the team to the point now where I would not be surprised if the Flyers need to make a move to get a player at the deadline, if Herman Rupsov is the guy that they try to move to another team to try and acquire the player that they feel they need. It's
a bummer for him. It
like is
how the mighty have fallen. The guy that was so highly regarded even a year ago.
Yeah, it's the one draft pick that if you look back over the last, I don't know how many years you want to say, and you know, Flyers usually do a nice job with their first round picks. If you go back and look, they've all been good NHL players. It's the one that I think that they're most disappointed in. I mean, even Samuel Morin, who still hasn't really, you know, made his mark in the NHL. He's played a couple games, but
Sam Morin is the Roman Quinn of the Flyers, a prospect who people have been clamoring for years to make the big team, but can never stay healthy enough to make it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, and I think that they still believe in him. They signed him to a new deal in the offseason, so that tells you they still believe in him. So, you know, but we knew at the time that he was going to be a project. All right, maybe we didn't think it would take 5 years, but here we are 5 years later. And defensemen do take longer to mature into an NHL role than forwards do. They have far more responsibility, a lot more to think about and learn. That's why when you see what Provorov's doing at the age that he is, you really know you have something special there. That's why when we were having the whole discussion with Kevin Kincaid, about when he was putting his top 25 players in Philadelphia list together. Like, we told him Provorov's got to be higher, and the reason is because
he almost didn't have. He had him in, I think, the low 20s.
And
I said, dude, he needs to be top 10. I'm like, he should be top 10, top 15 at the very worst.
Yeah,
a number one defenseman as young as he is.
Yeah, and he didn't quite understand why. But I'm telling you that, and I keep saying it over and over again. In 5 years, you'll know why we pushed for Provorov to be on that list higher than you had him. But so that's what makes what he's doing so impressive. But Moran, I think that the Flyers still believe in him, and I think that he's at some point going to get that opportunity. I'm not certain that Rubtsov ever gets the opportunity with the Flyers, and then they probably don't want it public that they're very disappointed with him as a player. But
whoops.
I guess that cat's out of the bag. But at the same time, I'm sure there are other teams who would take a Flyer on a first-round pick who's maybe underperformed to this point, and you get them into your system and you give it a shot. I mean, that happens in sports all the time. Change of scenery really works out for a guy sometimes. So maybe somebody would take a chance and say, yeah, we'll take Rubtsov and we'll give you our NHL player that you need to fill your role.
Yeah, so they're going to trade Rubtsov and Wayne Simmons, and they're going to promote Ratcliffe. Good. All right, so we know what's going on, and that's going to be part of the Erik Karlsson trade. Good. Who still hasn't been traded?
It's unbelievable.
Eric, what are you doing? By the way, so we've mentioned signings, we've mentioned trades, and we'd be remiss if we didn't point out that while we've recorded this podcast, it broke that Robert Haig signed a 2-year contract.
Yep.
For $1.15 million per season over the 2 years. So that's a total of $2.3 million for those of you who don't have a calculator handy. You're welcome. Not a bad deal. Haig is I would say he's intriguing insofar as I don't think he's going to ever become a top pair defenseman. I think that's pretty safe to say. But he's certainly a guy who is NHL caliber. Probably on a bottom pair, maybe in a good scenario for him, he ends up being a second pair defenseman, but not a bad guy, and certainly not a bad cap hit. I think he was making around $847,000 last year, so it doesn't represent that big of a jump, and you consider the fact that he's now proven that he can kind of hold his own in the NHL, so I think that's worth a modest increase. So I think he was the last notable restricted free agent that the Flyers had going into the season, so it's good to get that kind of figured out, well in advance of camp.
Yeah, absolutely, and arbitration was coming up, so they had to get something done with him, and so and the thing of it is by signing him to a 2-year deal, he's still a restricted free agent after that, so you still have control, even though he's 23 now, so he's got 2 more years. His age 24 year and age 25 year, so you have him going into his age 26 year still as a restricted free agent, and you can make a determination at that point where you think he fits. So it's good. That's good for the Flyers, good for Hextall to get that done, and really lock you in now. I mean, now when you look at this team, they have 7 NHL defensemen. I mean, I know. Technically, Provorov and Sanheim, because they're still on their entry-level contract, could be moved down to the minors. Obviously, Provorov's not going to be. I would hope Sanheim isn't this year. I think that he's at the point now where he should be on this team and ready to roll. But the only defenseman that I think has a shot, to make it out of camp that's in the minors is Phil Myers. Otherwise, I think who your defensemen are going into the season. Yep. I mean, McDonald, Gostisbehere, Gudas, Haig, Provorov, Sanheim, and then they have that Christian Folien, who they signed from the Kings. I'm
looking forward to Christian Folien's top pair minutes that he's going to be getting this year while Travis Sanheim rots in the press box. That'll be really exciting. Thanks, David. Yeah. David, I know you're listening. Let Sanheim play. Please free him from the press box. Just let the kid live. Let him live his best life. All right. Thank you.
So
anything else? I don't think there was anything else from your source, right? That was the end of it.
That's it.
And on a down note, good. Thank you for that. That's.
I mean, did you want me to start with that and then save the bury the lead? I could have done that.
I mean, they always say start with the bad news, right? But you really went
Well, I did. Well, I did, and to be fair, the news that I started with wasn't necessarily good news.
Fair.
Right? I mean, it wasn't bad news, but it wasn't good news.
Yeah. I guess it's time for the third edition of Who's That Flyer?
Oh, boy. Here we
go.
go.
The best part of Who's That Flyer is I think of a random flyer, and I pull up his stats, and I give you the thing, and I just looked this guy up, so I'm feeling pretty good about it. All right.
Here we go.
Are you ready?
As
so this
always.
man, this man played 13 years in the NHL. All right, 13 seasons.
Not all for the Flyers.
13 seasons. 5 of them were for the Philadelphia Flyers. Your team, your town, your Philadelphia Flyers.
5 years with the Flyers.
Yes. He played 311 total games for the Flyers, registering 44 goals, 66 assists for, once again, mathematicians out there, 110 points. He is a Finnish player, and he happened to play on the right wing. He also, his career spanned from the mid-90s
I think I know who it is already.
through the mid-late-ish 2000s. Name that flyer. Who's that flyer, Anthony?
If I had to guess based off of that information, and for the first time, Russ, I'll give you credit that you actually gave me some legit info to try and make a guess. I would say that is Sami Kapanen.
It is Sami Kapanen. Ding, 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 ding. Congratulations, Anthony. By the way, I got a real kick out of it. It happened last week after the episode posted on that Sunday morning. I can't find the guy's name now. There was somebody who tweeted at us, and apologies to that guy, who said that he was incensed, yelling on the train, I think it was.
Yeah.
That he knew it was Mike Rathje and was getting some strange looks that he was just yelling Mike Rathje on a train. So I'm hoping that if nothing else, we had somebody else yelling on public transportation, Sami Kapanen. But you got it pretty quickly, so hopefully everybody out there had fun with the third edition of Who's That Flyer. I don't think there's anything else that we really have to get to. We covered Haig. We covered the sources, the inside source who happens to be in the know. And it wasn't an industry source. It was a direct source. It's amazing how those things work.
Yeah, funny how that happens.
Interesting.
Funny how that happens. You ain't getting that. There's only one other podcast that's out there that would have someone who has access to such sources.
There's another podcast?
Well, I think we
there
might
is?
be. Yeah,
I heard I heard a rumor that there are two guys who have recorded, I think it's 30 episodes of a podcast that's related to a Philadelphia hockey team. I don't know if it's gone live yet, but I believe that this guy, and I think he's had some rotating co-hosts and guests and such, but yeah, I don't know. Do you want to let this one out for the people?
We should let this one out. We don't have a date yet, but I do know it.
That's what I said on prom night.
I do know that it will take place sometime in early September. But our good friend Jason Martitas from 97.5 The Fanatic, he has his own hockey podcast called Stick to Hockey. It's the Stick to Hockey podcast, and he always has a rotating guest host. It was actually suggested to us by a listener of both podcasts that we should have a crossover episode at some point and just have all of us sit around and just talk hockey for a while. And so I talked to Jason, and we kind of weighed all the options. How can we make this happen? And we're going to do it. We're just trying to figure out the logistics of where to record it, how to make it happen. But we're going to get some guests on from the Flyers and really just have a fun night or day, depending on when we record. But it'll be a crossover episode of Snow the Goalie and the Stick to Hockey podcast. And so all Flyers fans who listen to one show or the other or both can hear all of our opinions simultaneously. So that'll be
it's going to be swell.
Yeah,
the last time I talked to Martitas, we were arguing about LeBron James. He was one of the guys who had said that LeBron James or his people had been checking out Malvern Prep in anticipation of free agency, I guess, while the NBA season was still going on. He hopped on Crossing Broadcast with me and Kyle. And yeah, it's the last time I talked to him. So I'll look forward to that. It'll be some good hockey talk. And I think it'll be fun.
By the way, just the Twitter guy that made the suggestion. I should give props where they're due, right? is at the Maniac, but it's spelled Maeniac. That suggested get the Stick to Hockey Pod, and
I like the name.
Snow the Goalie together.
Dr. Jan Itter.
Yeah, I know,
Dr.
right?
Jan.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. I like that.
Good stuff. So that's
like
who
that,
that's who it was that made the suggestion, and so we said, you know what, not a bad idea. Let's see if we can make it happen, and we're going to make it happen. So
I guess
stay tuned for information on that.
We're the only Flyers podcast, and Jason Martinez also has a hockey podcast. I guess he may or may not discuss the Flyers from time to time, so that's good. I guess there's room in this town for a second podcast. I guess we'll allow it. I can't imagine that there's another one out there. One of whom of the co-hosts that clearly doesn't exist said that Nick Aube-Kubel doesn't deserve to be on an NHL roster. However, if that person had listened to the Snow the Goalie exclusive with Ron Hextall, they would know that Ron Hextall mentioned Nick Aube-Kubel by name, one of I think only 4 or 5 players that he mentioned from the minor leagues as somebody who could potentially come up and fill a role. But hey, you know what? Live your life. And if that person, if somebody who's that young and has been name dropped specifically by the GM isn't somebody that you think is worthy of being on a top 25 under 25 list, good luck. I really hope that the other 25 people you pick make the big club this year. Oh, they're probably not going to, right? Because there's not enough space for that, and that's stupid. Okay, I'm done. I was a little pen up. I got really angry about a hypothetical thing that doesn't exist. But anyway, here we are.
That's good.
That's good. Yeah, it's good. Yeah,
good stuff.
Great. Yeah.
Anyway,
all right.
I think that's it for me.
Yeah, I think we're good. So thanks again for listening to Snow the Goalie. And make sure you follow us on Twitter. Let us know what you think, how you feel, especially about this big-time breaking news that Anthony decided to sit on for 9 days to break on the Snow the Goalie podcast, which I'm very grateful for. I'm looking forward to any kind of posts or articles that come out from any Flyers people who listen to the show, and I think that's reportable. To be honest, I think that's a real thing.
You should. Well, when you put the link up on Crossing Broad, maybe you'll do a nice little post about it.
Oh, don't you worry about it, Anthony. I got this thing on lockdown. Very excited.
It's the summer. I'm not writing, so it's good.
Yeah, it's okay. That's all right. Look. My posting was pretty much limited to the Sixers. I did one Phillies post. I burned the internet, so I might stay away from that for a little bit. People just couldn't handle the truth about Carlos Santana and JD Martinez, but that's fine. So yeah, I'll put it out there, and it's very exciting. So well done, Anthony. And neither of us blabbermouthed it. That's pretty exciting. That's good.
I wasn't worried about me.
Well, let me. And if there are any other sources within the Flyers who want to get a leg up on Anthony and just leak it to me, you can slide in the DMs there at Joy on Broad on Twitter. And of course, if you're looking to drop some nuggets of knowledge to Anthony, he's at AntSanPhilly. Let us know on Twitter. How do you feel about Stastny being the real number 1 target over JVR? Does it change the way that you look at this offseason? Does it change the way that you view the JVR contract? And how do you feel about the way that the organization feels about Isaac Ratcliffe and about Jay O'Brien? And let us know. So until next time, that's Anthony at AntSanPhilly. I'm Russ at Joy on Broad. We'll talk to you again soon.